people have gotten a lot more comfortable buying jewelry online. And I think some of that is the product of the innovations we've done and the investment we've made in improving that digital experience. I think some of it is just, the more that they are using e-commerce in other channels, it also has a positive effect on, their ability to get comfortable with it in jewelry.
This is the Safari. The Safari is a tour around the consumer, brand, and retailing industry. And we have the great privilege here at my company, Traub, to really be exposed to many of the great minds of the industry who are forming and shaping the future of many different parts of the consumer, brand, and retail world. And I felt it was quite interesting for us to be able to not only learn from all of those people as we do every day, but memorialize it into a podcast, which could then be shared with many of our friends and clients and you, obviously, the listener. Welcome back to the Safari 2021. This is the first recording this year, and I am ready to go and very keen to get started with my first guest. We have not had anyone on the Safari who comes from the jewelry industry. And so we thought it would be really wonderful to speak to an executive from, frankly, I think, the largest single jewelry, if not diamond jewelry store in the world. And I think that Bill Brace, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Signet Jewelry and the Executive General Manager of Jared Stores, is probably one of the best people we could find. So let's get started. Bill, so nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Safari.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Morty. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah. So where are you right now? You're in. I can see you. Others can't. You're in a beautiful, I think, dining room at your home. Where are you again? I'm
just east of Cleveland, Ohio. So
there you go. Well, so
our headquarters, our Signet headquarters, are down in Akron. I chose to live up here in Cleveland for a little bit more of a metropolitan experience.
There we go. Well, you, like the rest of us at this recording, are in some form of shelter in place. I don't know how we call it these days. So let's kick off this 2021 season and talk about the jewelry industry. And I think just for the listener who may not know your business, and if they don't, they've been living under a rock, give us sort of the 90-second overview of yourself, your role, and the company itself.
Yeah, so let me start with Signet. I think a lot of people have never heard of Signet Jewelers, but they have heard of our banners, right? So K Jewelers, Jared, Zales, Piercing Pagoda. We've got a couple banners in the UK, also JamesAllen.com. So some of the biggest names in jewelry, and as you kind of alluded in the intro, we are the world's largest retailer of diamond jewelry. And at Signet, I've been there about 2.5 years now. I play 3 roles, actually. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the company. I'm also the Executive General Manager of our Jared Stores. And then I also lead up our services business, which right now includes, products like our extended warranties, our repair centers, those kind of things.
And service is everything in that business in particular, I'm sure. So listen, I think at first blush, someone listening who doesn't know anything about your business would say, oh, poor guy. He is in a jewelry business, that it's an expensive item, that is a mall-based retail company, and that frankly, weddings have been postponed. They must have really suffered. You haven't, and you've done incredibly well. Your whole company seems to have the pivot word. Here it is. You've pivoted in a way that many others have had to as well. So how have you, generally speaking, because we'll dive into some of the specifics a little bit later on, how have you all fared over this time?
We've done well. We've been pleased with our performance. And actually, we just announced some of our holiday results yesterday. Over the holiday period here, we were able to grow as a company 5.6% comp total, and 7.8% in North America. It's our best holiday results in 9 years. So we feel good about that relative to that, kind of historical comparison, and relative to our peers. Our industry data tells us that jewelry as a category was down 3 to 4%. That's MasterCard data. So our growth, in contrast to that overall category challenge, is pretty rewarding. And I'm sure we'll talk a whole lot more about this, but I would just give you the top line. I would say a lot of our success came down to our ability to move very quickly in COVID and really focus on digital innovation.
Yeah.
And really facilitate that move to online sales. And our online sales were up over 57% during the holiday period. So really fast growth that led our overall growth for the season.
Yes. So to all those who say you can't sell jewelry online, you say eat crow, right? It seems to work. But yeah. I think specifically, quite interestingly, and many big companies have had to do this as well. I mean, you have 3,200 stores approximately. And for your CEO to announce in October that we just lit up buy online, pick up in store, which people might think is easy to do, but ultimately there's a logistical element to that and a whole procedural element to it that some companies, especially big public companies, would take a year and a half maybe to roll out some kind of schema for that kind of a thing. Sounds like you've had to roll out not just one schema for something innovative, but maybe a handful of things. But so starting with the buy online, pick up in store, BOPIS, how did that go? How quickly were we able to just do it? And were there any procedures that you said, look, we just haven't got time for that, let's just go?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We honestly, we didn't decide to launch that till probably June, when it became evident that the pandemic was going to be extended. It was going to be protracted. It was going to extend into holiday season. And, we had to live as a company off of e-commerce and virtual sales for, the better part of 2 months. And we said, with all the unpredictability, we have to have that, that capability. So it became mission critical. And you're right. If in a normal time, it would have taken more than a year. But our we acted like our survival depended on it, because we genuinely believed that was the case. And, what has been so remarkable through COVID is we found time and time again, when we focus as a company, we can move mountains, right? When it's really clear what the priorities are, we can make it happen. And we did in this case. I really credit the team that did it for moving as fast as they did. And you're right, there were all kinds of operational challenges, getting that up in our stores, managing that on top of the normal workload, getting our system set so that we could get the right inventory reads and accurate, information up for our customers to decide what they were, what they could purchase. And how to make it happen. But in the end, we were really pleased. I mean, we were able to fulfill the majority of our orders within 4 hours, and really ended up being a key enabler, especially in those final days when shipments turned off, to our e-commerce success.
And consultation, which is so important in the physical experience, you also tried to adapt for a non-physical experience. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. And maybe before I dive into the details of that, I think one of the things that we'll probably talk a fair amount about here today is the essence of why has jewelry developed maybe more slowly online, and what's enabling us to accelerate now. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, jewelry is obviously a high value purchase. It is a relatively infrequent purchase for most people. And it is a purchase that often they feel intimidated by, right? They feel intimidated either because they don't know that much about the jewelry, and it gets confusing when you start talking about 4Cs and carats and, all of that kind of stuff. They feel often that it's not necessarily a transparent transaction, right? Where they They don't necessarily know if they should feel confident in the value and all of those kind of things. So that's why, jewelry, in a lot of ways, jewelry retailing hasn't changed that much for decades, maybe centuries, or even millennia, right? People go to someone they trust. You often hear in the industry, I got a guy, right? Which is code for, I've got somebody I trust, and therefore you can trust them. And, that's who people shop with.
And I think also the idea that in an economic maybe uncertain economic uncertainty, that value is one thing about the product and the service, but also the retention of value of jewelry, of especially fine jewelry. People sort of weren't going on vacation anymore, and presumably they needed to make it up to their significant others and buy some jewelry, a nice piece of something, whether it be in your category or elsewhere. But I think that must have impacted you, or did you feel that in some way, or is that sort of hard to tell?
For sure. I mean, I think in light of this situation, people have felt good about buying jewelry and gifting jewelry, something that they have confidence will be of more lasting value, right? And not just temporal in the same way that, some of the other ways that they might celebrate are just more temporary and fleeting and, in experiences or travel or those kind of things. But going back to your question about the virtual consultations, so jewelry has lagged other categories in the development of e-commerce. I mean, we've been in the low double digits here, for the last couple of years. And it's because of that trust factor, right? People want to go into a store. They want to be able to talk to somebody. They want to get they want to establish that human connection and have that, that ability to really have a conversation and really look at something before they buy. Obviously, when our stores shut off, then it was a huge threat to the survival of our business. And so we sprung into action. And fortunately, we had piloted in Jared last fall. We had piloted some virtual consultation, with the ability to go onto our website, click a button, be able to be taken directly to an in-store consultant where you could have a video chat with them. For a variety of reasons, it wasn't, fully successful in our estimate. We kind of put it on the back burner through holiday. Well, in March, we woke up, our stores were closed. That was, in addition to normal e-commerce, that suddenly became priority number one. And within 48 hours of us closing our stores, we had relaunched that feature on our websites. And I would tell you, it through that time, but even after our stores have reopened, that ability to have, to establish that, embed that human connection in an otherwise digital experience has been, I would say, enormously successful. I mean, our customers tell us they love it. We routinely have, user ratings of 4.6 or above. And it's been a huge enabler of sales that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to get.
So the consultation, though, obviously I can visualize that. And I can't wait after this to go and check this out, so I should have done it before. But to consult is one thing, but to then be able to visualize the item, did you use different kinds of photography, videography, to actually be able to, almost touch or see that piece up more clearly? What was used?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that is a big part of it, right? And being able to, with this video consultation, be able to have the consultant walk around, show people in the cases. I would tell you that
in the store.
Yeah, so that they're actually in the store. Although we had some people that were working from home, right? I mean, we've had to be very fluid on this. But you brought up another really good point, Morty, that I would say has been and continues to be a really big focus for us, which is the visualization of jewelry. Jewelry is a visual category. At the end of the day, it's all about, what people see, right? And so we have some, technologies, proprietary technologies that allow, loose diamonds to be magnified at 40 times and rotate, 360 degrees. And, what I was talking about transparency, this is a good example of being transparent so people can see with extreme magnification exactly what they're getting and the unique characteristics of that particular diamond. Right. And, so that's one example. Another example of something we actually introduced, since COVID hit is what we call visual search. So if you go on our websites, there's a little camera icon. You can either take a picture with your mobile phone, or you could upload a photo from Pinterest or Instagram or whatever, and it will then curate your search results to bring up products that we have that are either the identical piece or something very similar to it, to help guide your search and browse process to be much more efficient. Because that's the behavior. A lot of people will come into stores with a picture on their camera and say, "You have something like this." So we brought technology to facilitate that kind of search and discovery process.
And had you recently, let's say 2019, in 2019, were you already onboarding technology providers to try and provide this? I know you talked about the pilot program at Jared, but did you find yourself in a moment at the beginning of 20 saying, okay, we got to fire these guys up quickly? Or were you actually now going out to seek these services and providers and SaaS platforms in the technology realm to drive your innovation?
Yeah, I'd say both, right? So there were a number of things, like some of the examples that I've given you that were, let's say, in the hopper maybe before, but weren't seen with the same priority. So what changed was the priority and the immediacy. And, a little bit like we were talking on BOPIS, what pre-COVID may have taken us months or even a year or more was taking us days and weeks because of that extreme focus on get it done, really bringing together all the multifunctional resources to mobilize immediately and with a singular purpose.
Crisis, the mother of invention,
Yeah. But at the same time, there were new things that we went out and sought that we didn't anticipate we would need before COVID. We have some, as an example, we piloted some, live shopping technologies and events that honestly we didn't really think about until we got into COVID. And that was, seen as another way to outreach and connect with our customers while they're at home, while that's the primary venue for them to be able to shop. And so we did a number of those events for our different brands.
We'll be right back. I want to take a second to explain to you why Traub is able to bring you the safari. We pride ourselves in being at the very center of a very global, very complicated consumer and retail landscape. And in our travels, as we help think, manage, and expand businesses in many different channels and geographies, we're able to meet and learn from some of the great minds in this industry. And it's really wonderful to be able to bring them to you. And in doing so, I hope that you, the listener, will be able to learn a little bit more about what we do at Traub as well. Back to the safari. So it's really interesting. One of the themes that I've experienced, sort of talking to many people about how they changed within this environment, was that they felt unshackled by the potential for criticism from stakeholders because of the pandemic. Therefore, they could move quickly and unapologetically and act almost as if they were the entrepreneurial founders of that business, even though they may be a public company or even a large company for that matter. Do you think that sort of sentiment is something that you guys felt? And if it was, how does one hold on to that so that when the world does stop spinning again, that we don't have to be shackled by too much process and layers upon layers of bureaucracy? Not that I'm implying that's what you have. I'm saying in companies in general.
It is such a great question, Morty, and it is something that we have talked a lot about, as a leadership team, because I think you're right. We were thrust in a position, not unlike so many other companies, where failure was a real prospect. And when failure is a real prospect, it changes your mindset around risk profile. Yes. it led us to do things, like the example I gave you on virtual consultation. I would tell you the experience and the process and the way that all works now is different than it did in those early days. We had really embraced much more of what we call an MVP, or minimum viable product kind of mindset, to get something out and launch it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to have clear objectives. It has to have, it has to be good, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So move fast and then optimize as you go. And I would say, obviously COVID has been a terrible situation, but there are some silver linings. And one of those silver linings is, I think we will carry forward some of the lessons of how we worked and how that was liberating in terms of speed, yes, and in terms of delivering results, that we will carry forward with us. And it is an active discussion we have as a team to say, how do we make sure we don't lose some of the focus we had? How do we make sure we carry forward with some of the agility that we essentially built as new muscle?
Yeah. Now, are you guys primarily a North American business?
Primarily, about 90% of our business is in North America. We also, I mentioned, we have a couple UK banners, H. Samuel and Ernest Jones. We also have the People's banner in Canada, but about 90% of our business is in North America and the US.
So what was interesting to hear you speak about was regarding just beaming into a store, right? Or beaming or broadcasting on one of the social media platforms from a store can reach anywhere, right? And that you presumably can now sort of start to spread your wings beyond North America without physically having to leave North America. Has there been any sort of smoke there?
Yeah, I would say, we've had some conversations about that, and it definitely, this is where I think, the rapid acceleration of e-commerce is a great thing for us. One, because it's a better customer experience, but like you say, it really, this whole experience has opened our minds to how we think about our business beyond the boundaries of four walls, right?
Yeah.
And so, you're referencing one angle of that, which is international, but even domestically, how do we think about our ability to compete in markets where we don't have a physical store? We have that capability now. We have that capability, and for the first time, we're thinking, very intentionally about how we unleash that.
This time is rushing by, so I have so many more questions, but I'll try and now dive into the consumer a little bit. So, how have you felt? I mean, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but how have you felt that the consumer has evolved over this past year? And as you said a little bit earlier, whether some of it will stick, some of it won't, whether they will revert back or whether they won't. Particularly, I think in their psychology around jewelry, around that item and the behavior. Have you seen any significant changes?
Yeah, I mean, I would talk about a couple things, Morty. I mean, first of all, I would say another, silver lining, if you will, of COVID has been, it's broadly been good for relationships. So some of our, research tells us that, 47% of people feel better about the relationship they're in than they did before COVID. About 45% think it's about the same, which means 93% of people feel as good or better about the relationship they're in than before COVID. So it's a good time to be in the love and relationship business, and at a time when, some of the ways to celebrate those relationships, like travel and other experiences, whether it be spa or restaurant, are less accessible. People are gravitating to jewelry, right? And they are looking for tangible, lasting expressions of that. Yeah. We hear from some of our people like they're looking for jewelry simply to celebrate the end of 2020, right? Like, we got through this. So, I would say that's one thing. I think the second big change we've already talked a lot about, but it has been people have gotten a lot more comfortable buying jewelry online. And I think some of that is the product of the innovations we've done and the investment we've made in improving that digital experience. I think some of it is just the more that they are using e-commerce in other channels, it also has a positive effect on, their ability to get comfortable with it in jewelry. Right.
Yeah.
So every time somebody clicks buy on Amazon.com or, gets DoorDash or Uber Eats or any of that kind of stuff, it just starts to, it just makes those flywheels spin that much faster. So that would be the second factor, is just the comfort level. I think a third thing is we've seen, jewelry has always been about, kind of self-expression and whatnot. But what we've seen during COVID is a trend to what we call Zoom-worthy jewelry, right? So people are looking for, for bigger statements to make on their ears, right? People are looking for bigger statements to make on their fingers, right? And necklaces. So we've seen a real trend to bigger diamonds, right? So, purchases in 2 carats plus has gone up disproportionately. We see, a lot of growth acceleration in, stud earrings, big gold hoops, men's gold bracelets and necklaces, those kind of things. And then, the other thing, the final thing I would say, and this is a bit of an offshoot from that comfort online, we are seeing that people want to kind of continue that self-discovery mode of shopping when they get into stores. And so one of the things we've launched in a number of Jared's is what I call the self-discovery table, which is a display of diamonds so people can get a sense of the different sizes and what the different shapes look like, ability to compare different levels of clarity or color in the diamonds. But even more, I would say, powerful has been that we have brought the jewelry out of the case and put it on top of the table.
Yeah.
So people can pick up rings, they can try on rings, they can look at the rings, they can see what they're like. I mean, it's really liberated jewelry from, where it's always been
open cell,
behind the case, lock and key. And people love just sitting down at the table and trying things out. And then they look at, they say, well, I like this feature in this ring, and I like this feature in that ring. Is there anything you can do to put those together? And whether that's a style we have or whether that's a design we do in custom. So that I would say is, those are a couple of things that we're really seeing, accelerate through COVID.
It's so exciting. And my last question on this sort of consumer, I guess, is I think social media over the last 20 years has really caused one of the greatest accelerations or morphings of demographics and psychographics that we've ever experienced in the last a few hundred years. I mean, the changes in how people act, even the young brides and grooms, how they purchase together sometimes more. It's no longer a surprise. How various multicultural consumers purchase, and then self-purchasing females, sort of the empowerment movement of the female liberation, which has been an ongoing thing for decades, but obviously has taken on a whole new level in the last few years. Have you seen this young, let's call it, I think we can still call them, I guess it's young millennials who are probably in your sweet spot. How have they changed significantly from maybe the customer you remember 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think in let's say in demographics terms, they haven't necessarily changed that much. I would say what has changed is some of the behaviors and the way that they engage with the jewelry category. And what I would say one of the biggest differences has been in bridal and engagement, right? Where before there was, I would say relative to before 10 years ago, it's a much more non-traditional path to get there, right?
Yeah.
Most couples have lived together. Many have gotten a dog or a pet together. Often they have kids together. They've even bought a house together before they get engaged, which is very different than before. It was you get engaged, then you get the dog, then you have the kids, then you buy the house. So the sequence is off. And so often they're coming much further further down the path in terms of life stage. I would say another thing that we, see as a a slightly different behavior. We've got, the younger generation is less bound by convention, right? So that they are experimenting more with a wider variety of styles and stones, right? Using instead of a diamond, they might be getting a colored stone or even a black diamond, right? And so, yeah, it is more open ended in and less conventional in so many ways. I would also say that there's another huge trend, I would say, towards personalization and customization. People are less interested in buying, quote unquote, off the rack. They're much more interested in being able to combine, a loose diamond with a special setting, or even, through, like JamesAllen.com, configure a ring. Or in Jared, we've set up and launched some new capability around full custom, where they can go in, they can sit down with a designer in front of a CAD screen and design something truly bespoke. And then we have 3D printers that can print it out on the spot, so they can see exactly what it's like, try it on.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's that kind of involvement and personalization that I think is really fueling some of the differences between the jewelry consumer of today and the jewelry consumer of 10 years ago.
Well, Bill, you described your some of your consumers as less conventional. It certainly sounds as though that your company, Signet, is also not conventional, and you're doing some wonderful things to iterate and change and grow and morph, and use of technology. And frankly, as I said to you at the beginning before we joined, it's just so wonderful to meet incredible executives at incredible companies and to hear the stories of change during really times of great trouble. So Bill Brace, thank you so much for joining me on the Safari.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for having me, Morty. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
If you want to learn a little bit more about Traub, you can go to traub.io, where you'll learn a lot about everything that we do. If you're enjoying the Safari, please do share it with your friends and colleagues within the industry. And please also don't forget to subscribe and like it. Until next time.